Hi everybody, my name's David Bourne and I'm going to take you through this course on writing for academic English. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been teaching academic English for over 20 years now, and I've helped hundreds, maybe even thousands of students to become more confident in their writing. In this video, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what this course is about and who it is for. Now, I think there are three types of people who can benefit from this course. Firstly, if you are a student whose first language is not English and you're looking to improve your English for written communication, then this course will be of interest to you. The second group, of course, is people who are in education. So I'm talking about teachers, university lecturers, and educators. And often you guys will need to write papers and write material in English, and this course will help you with the foundational skills that you need to write more confidently. And then, of course, there are students. So if you are a student and you need to write theses or you need to write assignments or essays, then of course this course is going to be great for you. One of my goals in this course is to look at the fundamental principles of academic English, describe what they are, and basically make writing for academic English simple and easy for you. So in this short course, you will have the foundational skills to improve your writing significantly. Now, let me tell you what the contents of the course are first. So, this course is divided into 4 units. The first unit looks at the writing process, and it also gives an overview of writing for academic English, where we look at why you need it, how it is important, and what writing for academic English actually is. So the lessons in this unit will cover things like formal and informal style, being tentative, and generalizing. Unit 3 talks about how to use sources. So of course academic writing is based on the books and the articles that you read. So this unit is about how to describe the information from those sources in your writing. And we will look at things like paraphrasing, summarizing, and of course giving citations. Finally, Unit 4 is about organisation. Having your work clearly and logically organised is very important. So this unit will consider the overall organisation of your writing. We will also look at paragraphs and how to organise your paragraphs. And then within a paragraph, the topic sentence, which is a very important tool. So we're going to look at that as well. Okay, so I'd just like to suggest a few tips to make this course more useful and a success for you. Now, of course, there will be some lecture notes, but I do suggest that you sit down and you make notes, because if you make your own notes, that will deepen and strengthen your understanding of the material. It's also a good idea to practice, to copy out and try out some of the examples that I'm suggesting. I will also give you some practice exercises that you can work with. You might also like to play the videos again. Sometimes the examples can be very useful, and by playing them again you can get your head round and understand and be able to use the material more effectively. Finally, I'm sure some of you already have assignments. Maybe you have essays to write or theses to write or an academic paper. So why not try out some of my suggestions in this course in your real writing? Okay, thank you. So let's get on with the main lessons now, shall we? Alright, so to begin this course, I'd like to talk a little bit about the concept of writing in academic English. Because let's face it, writing in academic English can sometimes be a bit of a burden, and it's useful to have a bit more of a sense of motivation to sit down and do the writing. And in this video, I'd like to just talk about what academic English is and why you need to write in academic English. So my hope is that if we go through this, it will give you a clearer understanding and a bit more motivation to actually sit down and get on with it. Okay, so let's talk about why we need to write in academic English. So I'd like to suggest the 3 reasons here, and the first one is about acquiring knowledge. So of course, if you are writing about a topic, then you need to get an understanding. You need to transfer your understanding into writing. The very act of writing shows that you have acquired knowledge. Another reason for writing is because we need to interact with our reader, and one of the reasons for writing academic English is a way of sharing our thoughts, ideas about academic subjects. And then also, people write academic English papers because they have ideas, they have something to say. And writing it down in the form of a paper or an essay is something to say. Even if you are a student and you have an assignment where you have no choice but to write about some topic of your subject, you can still get the opportunity to write and share the ideas that you want about this topic. So there are opportunities where you can say what you think, and that's a good thing. Okay, so the next thing is to just understand what some of the activities are involved with academic English. So I've made a little list here. Let's go through them, shall we? The first activity is actually about reading about your subject. And of course, writing begins with reading. You'll need to read books, articles, and journals on the topic. Now, the next activity I've mentioned before in terms of why, and the activity really is about showing understanding. And when you're writing, one of your main purposes is to show your reader that you have a good understanding of the subject in question. When you write, you will be describing concepts, hypotheses, and situations of other writers. So this is from the reading, you need to describe those ideas. You might also need to describe how something works. Maybe this is some kind of economic or model or psychological model, or maybe it is something mechanical. You might need to explain something that is quite complex. Some ideas are expressed in a complex way, and the writer's job is to understand the complex and then rewrite it in a way that is easier for the reader to understand. Now, the last 2 points here, these are about critical thinking. And critical thinking is about discussing the strengths and weaknesses of the ideas and concepts presented in the books and journals and articles that you are reading. So in order to do that, you need to construct an argument and give supporting points that include facts and information that explain why you think the way that you do. So this is an important area that we will also look at in this course. Okay, so the format of writing in academic English comes in a number of different formats, but I think these are some of the most important ones here. So we might have assignments and essays, especially if you are a student, and then we have reports, we have research articles, and then we might have summaries as well. Okay, so we've looked at the concept of writing in academic English. Now, in the following videos, let's get into the details of the foundational skills that we need to write more effectively. Thanks. Thank you for joining me again. This lesson is about a specific strategy in academic writing, and we're going to be talking about generalizing. So in academic writing, generally you will be moving from the general to the specific. So what you will do is you will make a general statement, and then in the following sentences you will follow up with specific examples that explain that general statement. Let me give you some examples. Female students are mainly attracted to humanities subjects. So there is your general statement. Then you would follow up and give specific information that explains that general statement. In our example, this might be: enrollment figures from 3 universities revealed an average ratio of 3 female students to each male student. Now, let's talk about some of the useful language that you can use when you are generalizing. I would suggest that there are 3 main ways to generalize. The first one is generalizing in terms of quantity. So here we have some useful language to describe quantity. We have most, some, all, several and many, a large or small number of. The second area is to describe the frequency of something. And of course here you will be using frequency adverbs. Let's look at the examples, shall we? So we have words like usually, often, mainly, on the whole, generally, always, rarely, seldom, scarcely. Now, a third strategy for generalizing is to generalize in terms of certainty. And of course, this is another topic that we will look at when we discuss tentativeness in another lesson. Anyway, let's look at some useful words that you can use when you want to generalize in terms of certainty. So we have certainly, absolutely, undoubtedly, clearly, probably, presumably, and conceivably or perhaps. So that is the useful language. Let's look at some example sentences and you can see how to use these generalizing strategies. So these 3 examples are generalizing in terms of quantity. Most graduates do not set clear study goals. Several capital cities apply congestion fees to road users. Only a small number of residents adhere to local regulations. Okay. Let's look at some examples of generalizing in terms of frequency now. Environmental regulations are rarely adhered to. Confusion over word form often causes difficulty for the reader. Generally speaking, motivation in the organization is healthy. Finally, we have some generalizing in terms of certainty. Let's just look at these examples, shall we? It is absolutely clear that recent policies have caused confusion. It is undoubtedly the case that there is a crisis of confidence in the new leadership. Share prices could conceivably drop further in the next few months. So there you have it. This is an effective yet powerful way to write academic English. Start with a general statement, follow it up with more specific information and examples. And you can generalize in terms of quantity, in terms of frequency, and in terms of certainty. Nice and simple, but effective. I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in this lesson. This lesson is all about style and voice in academic writing, and it is a topic that many people worry about. So in this lesson, I'd like to give you the foundations of appropriate style and voice that we can use. And actually, when we look at the foundations, it's not that complicated. So there are two features of academic writing in terms of style. The style is objective and it is formal. Even if you do not agree with some of the ideas that you are discussing and you wish to express that disagreement, you still need to describe your thoughts about it in an objective way. So basically, to have an appropriate style in writing for academic English, I suggest that you apply three strategies. These are the three strategies. Number one is passive voice. Number two is to avoid personal pronouns. And number three is to use formal vocabulary. Let's look at these in more detail, shall we? So, number one, using the passive voice. The passive voice is something that you use in English when you want to focus on the object of the sentence. The form is simply using to be plus the past participle. So, for example, it might be is, was, are, were as the form of to be. And then the past participle, sometimes we refer to it as verb 3. Now remember that within the passive voice you can use different tenses. Let's look at some examples, shall we? I'll just read these through with you. The first one is in the passive voice. This theory was discredited by scientists. This teaching approach has been modified. That's the passive with the present perfect tense. And then one using will. The event will be held next year. It has been suggested that some leadership strategies are unrealistic. As a comparison, let's look at some active sentences, and you can see how the focus changes. Number one. Everyone knows that Chinese is a difficult language to learn. Number two, lack of training could have caused the accident. Number three, local farmers burn large sections of the forests every year. Number four, someone has borrowed the copy that is in the library. Number five, I will limit my discussion to the Civil War period. Number six, we define true as a piece of information that can be supported by facts. If you use the active tense, as we did in those examples, your writing comes across as a little bit subjective, that is, not objective. And for better academic style, you should use the passive voice and change those sentences into the passive voice. Now let's look at the examples using them rewritten in the passive voice. Number one, it is widely acknowledged that Chinese is a difficult language to learn. And you can see that I've underlined the passive structure in this sentence. Number two, the accident could have been caused by lack of training. Number three, large sections of the forest are burned every year. Number four, the copy that is in the library has been borrowed. Number five, the discussion will be limited to the Civil War period. Number six, the term true can be defined as a piece of information that is supported by the facts. Now, there is a special case when you do not really need to use the passive voice. And this case relates to reporting statistics. So of course, when you are reporting statistics, this is data, graphs, tables, and information like that, usually dealing with numbers and percentages. So in this example, it is in the active voice. Everybody in the survey agreed that this was an important point. Alternatively, 100% of respondents agreed that this point was important. So these two sentences are in the active. And the second one is a bit more objective, a bit more formal, so that is a better style than the first one. Let me show you the sentence in the passive voice. That this point was important was universally agreed by participants. You can see that this is in the passive voice, and it's kind of a awkward, difficult sentence to follow. The meaning is not very clear. So in this case, you're much better going with the second example that I've shown you here. So the second feature of academic writing is to avoid personal pronouns. Personal pronouns are words like I, me, we, us, you. Let's look at some more examples and see the difference between the style when you use pronouns and when pronouns are not used. Here we go with the first example. I think that Brown is optimistic on this point. From Ellis in his article, he reported that helplessness is a learned behaviour. The approach seems counterintuitive to me. Green does not tell us how he arrived at his conclusion. Alright, so let's look at the same sentences without using personal pronouns. So here is the first one, and I've put these in a different colour. Brown can be considered quite optimistic on this point. In his article, Ellis reported that helplessness can be learned. This approach appears to be counterintuitive. Green does not describe how this conclusion was reached. Alright, let's consider the third element of academic style and voice. This is all about the vocabulary that you use in your writing. You need to use formal vocabulary. It's useful to consider some of the things that are not appropriate in academic writing. And I'd like to talk about two things here. This is about verbs with prepositions and colloquialisms. That is slang and kind of informal phrases that are used in speaking rather than writing. Let's show you some examples. With these examples, I've shown you the formal and informal alternatives. We have discover, which is better than find out. We have delay, which is a better choice than put off. Turning the examples around, we have look into versus inspect. Which one is better? Inspect, of course, is better. And then we have write about versus describe. And of course here, describe is the better choice. These are examples of verbs with prepositions, and you want to avoid the verbs with prepositions. Let me show you some colloquial phrases now. This is cool. The traffic is nuts. Mum's cooking. Head over heels. These are the kind of things that we might say in conversation, but we do not use in academic writing. Now, this is vocabulary, and I can't give you a list of all of the academic words to use, so you will need to use your academic power and make your own choices. Just think of these two things. Is it colloquial, and are you using verbs with prepositions? Let me just summarize what we've covered. And these are the three key features of academic writing. Number one, use passive voice. Number 2, avoid personal pronouns. And then number 3, use more formal vocabulary. So let's just look at how this works with a few more examples. First, we'll begin with examples of poor style in academic writing. I read in Brown that Romans had found out how to make paper. In this chapter, Green writes about the effect of L2 interference. In this romance, the protagonists fall head over heels in love. So, if we rewrite this using better academic style, we have: Brown suggested that the Romans discovered the process for manufacturing paper. In this chapter, Green describes the effects of L2 interference. In this romance, the protagonists quickly develop strong feelings for each other. In this romance, the protagonists quickly develop strong feelings of affection for each other. So, there's the summary. Use passive voice, avoid personal pronouns, and use formal vocabulary. Simply doing these 3 things and you're well on your way to having accurate style and voice in your academic writing. Thank you for this lesson. Let's move on to the next one. Welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to talk about the importance of referencing. So let's talk about the reasons for referencing to begin with. Now, in academic English, referencing is very important and you need to get this right. Let's look at why. So the first reason is that you are showing or discussing the ideas of other writers on the subject. And if you are discussing other people's ideas, you need to recognize that. You show the recognition by giving the reference of the other writer. Another reason for giving clear references is to show how well you know your subject. Now, in any subject, there will be a number of important articles, important books, or maybe important authors or experts on the topic. So if you're going to talk about any topic, you need to show that you have read and understood all of the key points related to that topic. And you can do that by showing the correct references. The next reason is to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism means pretending that other people's ideas are not yours. And this is a bad thing to do in academic writing. People have got in lots of trouble for this. It is basically lying. So whenever you express an idea from another person, you need to show the reader that the idea came from that other person, not from you. You will also need to use references in order to support your argument. If you present an argument, then that argument has to be supported with supporting points. Those supporting points will come from the ideas, models, concepts, and theories that are put forward from other writers. So you need to use the ideas of a topic. And if you're using other people's ideas, once again, you're going to give the reference there. Similar to this, you might want to justify the topic of a paper. Your reason for writing usually depends on the ideas and concepts that have come before it. Maybe you want to make a correction, maybe you want to develop and grow a previous idea. So you need to quote the reference and your, if you like, your inspiration for writing about the topic. Now, there's a few more general points I'd like to make about references. So a good point to remember is that references are useful for the reader. They give the reader the complete information about the book titles, the publisher, and where they can find the ideas that you are writing about. So readers might want to not just check, but they might want to go to the books and articles that you used in your writing. They might want to learn more, and they might want to study the topic and get wider knowledge. So your bibliography and list of references can be very useful for the reader. Of course, I think most people know that you need to have your bibliography at the end, and what I mean by this point is don't forget to include your bibliography. Another simple point to remember is that the bibliography is listed alphabetically by author. The key information you need to include is the author, the year of publication, the title, and the publisher. Now, there's quite a lot of rules about how to write references, and these all relate to things like punctuation, font style, when to use capital letters, and so on. I won't go into that in this lesson, but I do suggest that you check carefully how the punctuation is applied in your list of references. One of the most common ways to write references is something called the APA guide. And if you do a Google search, you can see some examples on how the APA guide works. So that is a good place to start. All right, there we have it, talking about references. So just remember to be careful, and if you're in doubt, give the reference. Thank you. Let's move on to the next lesson, shall we? Hi everybody. Thank you for watching this video, and this video is all about tentativeness and hedging, which is a very important part of your academic writing. So let me begin by talking about what I mean by hedging. What does tentativeness or hedging actually mean? This is about taking a cautious position in your writing. It means having the attitude that you could be wrong as you discuss the ideas and thoughts in your writing. Now, let's look at why this is important, because it is a very important attitude to take, and I'll explain why. So, academic study consists of arguments, hypotheses, opinions. And of course, there is always a lot of discussion in support or against these ideas, opinions, and hypotheses. As a writer, you need to be aware that there is a discussion, and that some scholars have identified weaknesses or flaws in certain arguments or hypotheses. And to do this, you need to write in terms of being tentative and being cautious. In this lesson, I'm going to suggest some useful language that you can use quickly and easily in order to express tentativeness. Let's look at them, shall we? Okay, now the first area of language you can use is quite simple. These are the modal verbs. Now, there are 3 modal verbs you can use. These are very common in English, so I'm sure you will have no trouble with them. They are might or may, could and should. Let's just look at a few examples of sentences that use these verbs and show tentativeness then. So the first one. This model might be more relevant to economic policy 20 years ago. Ellis's theory should predict the causes of this disease. And then Hans' definition could apply to this topic. Now, just before we go on to the next item, I just want to talk about must and will. And you need to be careful of the modals must and will. Of course, it is possible to use them if you like, but you need to be aware that when you write a sentence with must or will, you're making a very strong statement, and this might make you open to criticism from others. All right, the second area of language that you can use is to describe probability. So in terms of probability, we're talking about something you are certain of, but you're not 100% certain. And here are the useful words. Once again, as I said, it's fairly simple, and I'm sure you are familiar with these words. So let me just go through them with you. So we have possibly and probably, almost certainly, perhaps, and conceivably. All you need to do is just drop these words of probability into your sentences and you have some tentativeness there. Let's show you some examples. If this hypothesis is true, it is possibly going to have a big impact on studies in the field. Redwood probably thinks that this is an effective way to teach. Task-based learning conceivably makes classroom activities more realistic. Now, the third area of expressing tentativeness is to use hedging verbs. So these are verbs that express caution. Let me give you some examples. We have seem, appear, indicate, suggest and doubt, tend, look like. So you need to use these as verbs in your sentence, and let's give you some examples of how you can put these hedging verbs into sentences. Brown appears to support this claim. It looks like the business model is an effective strategy. New research on nutrition suggests that a plant-based diet is the most healthy. Now, the final area of language that you will find useful to show tentativeness in your writing is by using that statements. Let me show you what I mean with a few examples again. So here they are. So that statements are fixed phrases, and you can just copy the examples I'm showing you here right into your academic writing. It could be the case that. It could be suggested that. It might be that. It is possible that. All right, let's see these that statements in action in a full sentence now, shall we? So the first example, it could be the case that the data was not recorded accurately. And the second one, it might be that visual input has a positive effect on children's learning. And the final example, it is possible that Brown was being over-optimistic. All right, in the last part of this lesson, let's compare some sentences that use tentative language against those that do not use tentative language. Hopefully you can see that the sentences with tentative language have much more effective academic English writing style. Let's start with the first example. So, in all of these examples, we will begin with the sentence without any tentative language in it, and then I will show you the second sentence of the same thing but using tentative language. Processed meat causes cancer. It could be the case that processed meat causes cancer. And the second one, people who write down their goals will achieve them. And then the sentence with tentative language. It might be that people who write down their goals are more likely to achieve them. And the third one, Brown claims that his methodology results in faster learning. And then using a hedging verb, Brown seems to claim that his methodology results in faster learning. The next one, the data shows a significant increase in the popularity of evening classes. And then with tentativeness, the data indicates a significant increase in the popularity of evening classes. Next, the Gulf War was one of the most controversial of modern times. And then, the Gulf War was probably one of the most controversial of modern times. And the final example here, animal farming is one of the biggest causes of global warming. And the same sentence using tentativeness, animal farming is conceivably one of the biggest causes of global warming. Okay, so let me just summarize this lesson. We've talked about the useful language that you can apply to make your writing show tentativeness and hedge some of the statements and comments that you make. It's pretty easy. You can just apply the examples that I've shown you in this lesson. Let me just summarize the language that you can use here. So we have modal verbs. We have adverbs to express possibility. You can use hedging verbs. And finally, you can use that sentences. It's as simple as that, really. Just go ahead and apply this to your academic writing and improve your style. Thank you. I'll see you on the next lesson. This lesson is all about citations. And citations happen when you need to refer to other people's writings expressed in other books, articles, or journals. So this is something that you will do throughout your academic writing, and it's a very important thing that you need to get into the habit of. If you don't give citations, then your marks will suffer, or you will get criticism if you're writing some kind of academic paper. So let's look at how to make citations in your academic writing, shall we? So, as usual, we'll start with understanding why citations are important. And they are important because you need to give credit to other writers. It is important that you acknowledge the ideas of other writers, and you need to acknowledge it in writing through a citation. When do you give a citation? The answer is simple. You give a citation every time you mention another author. In order to give a citation, you need to include the following information in your text. That is the author's name, the year of publication of the relevant book or article that you are citing, and then the page number. Now, I should say that there are different systems for providing this information, and you need to check what kind of system is being accepted for your academic writing. I'm not going to go through it in this lesson because you will find that relevant to the context where you're working. However, it's important to remember that this is what you need to include. Alright then, so let's look at some of the useful language you can use in order to give a citation. And I'm going to suggest 3 different areas of useful language here. We begin with nouns. Nouns such as researcher and scholar, writer and author. The second area, which is used quite a lot, are useful verbs. And here's a nice list for you. We have comment, state, argue, find, discover, write, reveal, point out, indicate. report, conclude, claim. And then finally, we have phrases for citation. One of the most common is according to, evidence from, in the opinion of. Alright, so let's make this language more real to you by looking at some examples of citations using the areas of language I've just talked about. The first set of examples begin with citation of the actual author that you are referring to. Andrew reported that, Brown explained that, Collins found that, Davis argued that. And of course, you can see in brackets we have further information about the year of publishing and the page numbers there. After the that section, of course, you will include your summary and paraphrase of the author's idea. It's also possible to do things the other way round, where you give the citation language first and then follow it up with the author. Here's some examples. It has been argued that, some authors argue that, it is reported that, one researcher found that. Alright, I'll give you another set of examples, and these examples use the citation phrases that I suggested. Let's look at these now, shall we? So we'll begin with the most common one, according to Brown, blah blah blah. And then, in the opinion of Collins, blah blah blah. Evidence from Davis, blah blah blah. After that, of course, it will be your paraphrase or summary of the ideas you are describing from that author. Finally, another way of making a citation is to make a statement, but the actual information about the author and the publishing year is just given in brackets at the end of the sentence. As you can see from these examples, you'll begin with the statement, according to one researcher, in the opinion of one scholar, evidence from one writer. And then, of course, you supply your paraphrase or your summary of that idea. At the end, you will refer to the author, the name, the year of publishing in brackets. Alright, so I'll just close this lesson with a few full examples of how you can give citations. Now, I should say that with these examples, they are completely fictional. The first one then, according to Brown, task-based learning was first developed in 1990. And then, evidence from one writer showed that many dinosaurs had feathers. And finally, Vickers found that babies could identify colour from as early as 3 months old. As I say, I did invent these summaries, so they're completely from my imagination there, just to illustrate the method of making citations. Remember, of course, that after the citation, you need to give the full reference in the bibliography at the end. And there you have it. It's as simple as that. Always remember to put the citations in and acknowledge the work of other people. Thank you. Let's go to the next lesson now, shall we? In this lesson, I'm going to break down the steps involved in paraphrasing and show you some examples. Obviously, this lesson is closely related to the lesson on summarizing, and the difference here is that paraphrasing, you don't need to make your text shorter. It can be the same length as the original or maybe even longer. All right, let's get going and let's look at how to paraphrase. So, of course, the first question is, what is paraphrasing? So I would describe paraphrasing as writing the ideas of someone else using your own words. And of course, an important question to understand is, why is paraphrasing important? And here are the reasons why you need to paraphrase. So it shows that you understand the content well. If you can write about something in your own words, of course you are exhibiting deeper understanding. So of course, if you just copy something from a book or an article, there's no guarantee that you actually understand what has been written. Paraphrasing shows that you have that cognitive ability. Okay, so let's talk about how to paraphrase, and here I'm going to suggest a number of important steps that are involved in the process of paraphrasing. So let me go through these with you. So step number one, of course, begins with reading, and you need to read the original text from the book or from the journal article very carefully and in detail. Once you have read it and you understand the point, then you need to identify the key words and phrases that are used in the text. Step number 3 is to change the structure of the text. So, of course, paraphrasing is putting things into your own words, which means you do need to change the original. So, step number 3 is to change the structure. And then step number 4 is to use different vocabulary. These are the two weapons you have in paraphrasing. By structure, I mean grammar. So changing the grammar and changing the words. Then step number 5 is to rewrite your ideas. Finally, check your work to make sure it is okay. Note also, this is just a reminder, you still need to give reference to the original work. So you need to give a citation as you would any other kind of work. Even though you're writing this in your own words, you still need to include the citation. Alright, so that's an overview of the 7 steps. Let me talk about some of these steps in a little bit more detail. So step number 1, we said, was to read the extract carefully. And here are a few tips when you are reading. The first thing is to be clear about what information you are looking for from your reading. What do you want to use the original source for? Do you want to use the original source to support a point? Do you want to use it to give an example? Do you want to use it as a way of proving something is wrong? So think about what you already know about the topic as well. Your own background knowledge related to this topic will be useful. Look for paragraphs and statements that highlight an important idea relevant to your paper, thesis, or assignment. So you need to know why you are using this material. So let's just look at an example. Now, I'm going to use a quotation because that's the easiest way to illustrate paraphrasing, I think. And we've got this example from Epicurus. You don't develop courage by being happy in your relationships every day. You develop it by surviving difficult times and challenging adversity. So let's look at how to paraphrase this quotation. So what you need to do next, this is step 2, is to identify the key words and phrases. So you can use highlighters, of course, colours to underline the key words. So here I've underlined the key words from our example quote. You can see we've got things like develop courage, happy, relationships, surviving difficult times, and challenging adversity. So the next thing is to think about how you might change some of the vocabulary from the original and use other vocabulary. So again, this will depend on your key words. Look at your key words and then think about how you can change those key words. So you can do this, you can use synonyms. You can use different word forms. For example, you can change nouns, verbs, and adjectives around. And also, it's a good idea to use a dictionary or a thesaurus or a word builder. These things can be very useful. Rather than killing yourself and thinking of it, of the alternative words yourself, use the tools that are available to you. Here's the example again. You don't develop courage by being happy in your relationships every day. You develop it by surviving difficult times and challenging adversity. So if we look at the key words, we've got things like develop courage, happy, relationships, surviving difficult times, and challenging adversity. So if you think about alternative vocabulary for develop courage, we can say increase bravery. Happy, a synonym might be content, peace of mind, joy. Relationships might be, an alternative might be interaction. Surviving difficult times, overcoming bad periods. Challenging adversity, fighting against problems. So you can see that paraphrasing, you need to be fairly systematic about it. Okay, so let's carry on now. The second strategy, as well as changing the vocabulary, is to change the structure of the text. So let's look at that now. And what you can do is you can change nouns to verbs, because of course when you change the grammatical form of the word, you need to change the sentence structure. And you can do it the other way round. You can change verbs to nouns. You can also change adverbs to adjectives, or you can make the active voice the passive, or of course the passive voice the active. Another thing you can do is break the text down into smaller sentences. So let's just look at this example here. This one, you don't, is in the active. So if we change courage, which is a noun, brave becomes an adjective. And then happy is an adjective, contentment becomes a noun, and you don't is in the active voice. All right, so just going back to our example, we've identified some of the key words. We've thought about some of the alternative vocabulary you can use. Now let's consider the possible change in structure. So here are a few points. You can see that courage is a noun, and we're changing it to brave, which is an adjective. And then happy is an adjective, and we're suggesting something like contentment, which is a noun. And then you don't, of course, is in the active voice. So let's see how we might paraphrase this particular quotation. So here is the original again, and this is a possible paraphrase that you might have. Epicurus claimed that bravery cannot be increased in human interaction on a daily basis. It is earned by overcoming bad periods and fighting against problems. And you can see that we have a combination of changing the structure and changing the vocabulary, and we have quite a nice little paraphrase that comes across as quite sophisticated and a strong writing there that shows that the reader has a clear understanding of this quotation. All right, let's just look at a few more simple examples. So with these, I've given you some idioms and the paraphrase of these idioms. So let's just look at them. Practice what you preach. And again, you can see the key words are in bold. So we might paraphrase this as do what you say. Love will find a way. Of course it will, as the song suggests. And then the paraphrase might be, if people are in love, things will work out okay. And here's another famous little proverb. It's no use crying over spilt milk. Again, you can see I've put the key words in bold. So we might paraphrase this as, there is no need to be upset about events in the past. So that's the idea of paraphrasing. If you're not confident, it's a good idea to do a bit of practice. So have a look at these and see if you can paraphrase them yourself. Rewrite these proverbs in your own words. So I'll just go through these little list. I've given an 8 here for you to practice on. If a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Let sleeping dogs lie. Lightning never strikes twice in the same place. Make hay while the sun shines. Money isn't everything. Necessity is the mother of invention. Never look a gift horse in the mouth. Out of sight, out of mind. There you go, there's 8 proverbs. Have a go at rewriting them and paraphrasing them using your own language. Okay, so let's work with some more examples. Now, these examples are a little bit longer. Obviously, in academic writing, you're going to need to paraphrase paragraphs or sections in articles and books. So we're going to just look at some longer examples here. Let's start with this one. Example number 1. So this is the original text, and I'll read this out to you. These men lived at the full pitch of responsibility and anxiety, rendered infinitely worse by the unreliability of the Queen. The perils of ambition and high position were sometimes dreadful. On 4th of April 1578, the Earl of Bothwell, Mary Stuart's tempestuous husband, died. He ended his days raving while tied to a pillar in the dungeons of Dragsholm Castle in Denmark. His mummified body could, until 1976, be seen in church close to the castle. So these men refers to the court of Elizabeth I, and the Queen here is the Elizabeth I. A little bit of background information to help you understand. This is a text from a history book. Okay, so here are the key words highlighted and underlined from this passage, and you can see we've got things like full pitch of responsibility, anxiety, worse, unreliability, perils of ambition, dreadful, Mary Stuart's husband, tied to a pillar, the dungeons. So this text is quite rich. It has quite a lot of interesting vocabulary here, and you need to make a decision yourself about what the key words are or which words you want to change. But certainly look at it and underline those words there. So here we go. This is rewriting a little bit using different vocabulary. And we've got Ackroyd, 2012, described the stressful environment for men at the court of Elizabeth I. The men held many responsibilities, and the fact that they could not predict the Queen's reactions made them feel extremely anxious. As an example, the husband of Mary Stuart, the Earl of Bothwell, died as a madman. He had been tied to a post in a jail in a Dragsholm Castle in Denmark. So you can see that I've changed the vocabulary of the key words, and I've also changed the structure as well. Let's look at another example, shall we? So this is slightly longer. For East Asian generals, Sun Tzu became a standard text. He was an evident influence in the writings of the Chinese communist leader Mao Zedong. Napoleon was said to have studied a French Jesuit's translation of The Art of War. Though not available in English until the early 20th century, it came to be taken increasingly serious as a source of military and, during the 1980s, even business wisdom. The book's approach was most relevant for those facing complex struggles in which encounters were said to be indecisive and alliances and enmities were shifting. So this is actually from a book on strategy here, something different there. So again, this is fairly long, but as academic writers, we often need to paraphrase fairly extensive texts. Once again, read through it, underline the key words, and look at the structure. So here's how I would identify some of the key words from this original text. We've got these in highlighted again here: standard text, evident influence, Mao Zedong, Napoleon, not available in English until the 20th century, taken increasingly seriously, most relevant, complex struggles. So you need to think about those highlighted words and what alternative vocabulary you might use. So here is a possible paraphrase. Friedman describes how Sun Tzu's Art of War was very influential. Historical figures such as Mao Zedong and Napoleon wrote about or studied the text. At the beginning of the 20th century, it was translated into English, and both the military and, in the 1980s, even business took an interest. The book applied to those who were experiencing complicated interactions, where allies and opponents changed often. Okay, so there you have it. There's some steps, what you need to do for paraphrasing, and we've looked at some examples. Please start with those proverbs because they are nice and short, and then move on to see if you can paraphrase whole paragraphs. Of course, the more you do, the easier it becomes. Yes, you need to use your English power, but remember, you can always check things up in a dictionary and thesaurus to find alternative vocabulary that you can use. Okay, that's it for paraphrasing. Here are the references, by the way, that I used in those last two examples. And thank you very much. I look forward to meeting you in the next lesson. Hi everybody, thank you for coming back. And this lesson is about summarizing. Now, I should say before we get into this lesson that there is another video about paraphrasing. And of course, paraphrasing and summarizing are similar skills and techniques. So I do strongly suggest that you also watch or go through the lesson on paraphrasing as well as this one, because I go into quite a lot of detail in the paraphrasing lesson as well, and there are many skills that you can use for paraphrasing when you are summarizing too. Anyway, we're talking about summarizing, so let's get started, shall we? So the first question to ask, of course, is what is a summary? So a summary identifies the main points of a text. And when I say text, I'm talking about maybe a whole book, an article in a journal, maybe the chapter of a book, or maybe just a paragraph. Now, of course, by the meaning of the word summary, remember that a summary is much shorter than the original text. This is what identifies the difference between summary and paraphrase. With summary, you're only focusing on the main points. Now, an important question that you need to be clear about is, when do you need to summarize? And these are the situations that I would suggest. So the first situation is when you do not need to cover the details. You only need to provide the main points and ideas of another writer. Another situation is when you need to give quick reference to another text. Alright, so let's talk about the process of summarizing, and I will describe a process that takes several steps, and then after that we'll look at some examples. So step number one is that you need to read and understand the original text. So as you are reading, you need to think about the writer's main point and purpose that they are trying to make in the text. You need to be clear in your mind about why you are summarizing a particular point from another writer. Now, to do this, I will suggest two important questions that you need to clarify for yourself. The first question is, do you want to strengthen an idea? And the second question is, do you want to challenge an idea? So when you write academically, you are considering and thinking about ideas on the topic of your discussion. When you express your ideas and thoughts, you need to include supporting points. And these supporting points will often be either to strengthen your thoughts or to challenge the thoughts of other writers. And you can use summaries as the supporting points from other books and texts. Alright, let's look at step number 3 now. So step number 3 is still part of the reading stage, and this step is to underline the main points that are made in the text. Now, when you do this, a good tip is to look for topic sentences. Topic sentences, of course, identify the main points. Remember that most texts consist of 3 components. These components are the main idea, supporting points, and then examples. So as you read, you need to be able to identify between those 3 components. Think to yourself, is this a topic sentence? Is it a supporting point or an example? And then, because this is a summary, focus on the topic sentences and the main ideas there. Okay, so step number 3 is to change the vocabulary. Now, it is important to change the vocabulary, and when you summarize, you are using the ideas of others, but you are writing them in your own words. Now, remember that doing this is an important thing to do. You can't just copy the original words. If you do, then you could be in trouble for plagiarism. And if you use your own vocabulary, you're showing that you have mastered the understanding of the ideas. And this is the important emphasis behind summarizing. You're showing that you do understand exactly what you are writing about. So here's a couple of tips for changing the vocabulary. So underline the words that you're going to change, and then think about what the alternative words and phrases available that you can use. Of course, it's a good idea to have a dictionary and a thesaurus available, and certainly as you are doing your summarizing, using these tools will be so much easier rather than you trying to have to kill yourself and remember new words. Now, you've changed the vocabulary. The next step is to change the grammar of the text. So here are a couple of tips for changing the grammar. Change nouns to verbs. change the active to the passive voice. And of course, I've talked about using the passive voice in the lesson on correct academic style. So if you want more information about the passive voice, please go and check out that lesson. Step number 5 is to simplify the original text. And you can do this basically by making the sentences shorter and simpler. Finally, step number 6 is you are now ready to write your own sentences. So the checking your grammar, checking the vocabulary, and writing short sentences, these will be kind of like the note-taking stage, and you just need a pen and pencil and to scribble out your ideas. Step number 6 is to put all these ideas together and write a summary. Finally, step number 7 is to, of course, go through and check the final summary that you have written. Nothing comes out right the first time, so don't worry and don't be a perfectionist. Just write your best summary, go through, check it and change it if you need to. Remember that the main point of the summary is the main point. So you need to capture that main point as clearly as possible. And this is the fundamental principle that you need to remember with summaries. Make sure that the reader clearly understands what the main point is that you're trying to get across. Alright then, so let's look at a few examples, and for these examples of summaries I've decided to use quotations from famous people. We'll look at the original quotation first, and then I'll show you a possible summary. Of course, the wording of the summary will vary according to the person who writes it, and different people will use different ways of summarizing the same quotation. However, the main idea will remain the same, and that, as I said before, is something that you need to communicate. Just focus on that main idea. Anyway, let's look at example 1, shall we? So example 1 is a quotation from Nelson Mandela, and this is the original. I'll just read it to you. It is better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger. Then people will appreciate your leadership. So the summary for example number 1 looks like this. In good times, lead from behind. In hard times, lead from the front. And you can see that I have used different vocabulary, and I have changed the grammar, and I have made the sentences a lot simpler. Let's look at example number 2 now. So this example is from an American politician and military leader called Colin Powell. I'll read the quotation to you. Leadership is solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you have stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help or concluded that you do not care. Either case is a failure of leadership. Once again, read it, think about the main points, consider which vocabulary you're going to change and how you're going to make simple, short sentences. So here is a possible summary. If people no longer come to you with problems, you have failed as a leader. Okay, and one more example. All right, so let's look at one more example now. And this example is from Henry Ford, the famous manufacturer of cars. Life is a series of experiences, each one of which makes us bigger, even though sometimes it is hard to realize this. For the world was built to develop character, and we must learn that the setbacks and griefs which we endure help us in our marching forward. And here is the summary for this example. The problems that we go through help us to keep moving forward. All right, so that is the process for summarizing. And we've looked at those 7 steps, and I've shown you how this would work with a few examples from quotations. Of course, it is down to practice, and using quotations is a good idea. If you don't have any confidence, maybe you can find some famous quotations and practice summarizing using those. Again, the more you practice, the better you will be. It's really just down to getting on with it and doing your best. Let me just review the steps for summarizing. So remember, the first thing is to read and understand. And then the second step is to underline the main points. Make sure you are very clear about the main point of the original text, because that is the idea that you need to communicate to your reader. Then think about changing the vocabulary from the original into vocabulary of your own. The next change you need to make is changing the grammar. And linked to this is simplifying. So try to make the grammar more simple. Finally, you're ready to write the summary in your own words. Remember that summaries are shorter and simpler, and they contain the main idea. Also, remember to check your writing once you have your summary. It can always be improved, and it's much better for you to check. Okay, so that is the lesson on summarizing. We'll stop there, but as I said at the start of the video, please check out the sister lesson, which is about paraphrasing, and many of the steps that I've talked about here, I will go into more detail when we look at paraphrasing. Thank you. Okay, everybody, I'm going to talk about organization of paragraphs in this video. And this is a really useful video because if you can organize your written product in a clear, logical way, then that's going to help the reader, and it's going to make your writing that much more stronger and powerful. So let's look at how to organize and think about your paragraphs, shall we? As I said, good writing has a clear structure. This allows your reader to understand and follow your instructions. The important tip here is to be very clear about the genre, that is, the type of text that you are writing. Now, I talk about this in other videos, so let me just mention them here. So possible genres might be a report, a proposal, an article, or maybe an assignment, or maybe an essay, something like that. What you need to do is identify the various sections or ideas within your report, your proposal, or assignment, whatever it is. Be very clear, think exactly about what they are. Then what you need to do is plan the main ideas within the section. So you're kind of going from general to focused. In the first point, you recognize the genre, then you break it down into sections, and then you break it down into the main ideas within those sections. Basically, whatever kind of text you're writing, it's going to look like this. So you've got the whole text here represented by this blue box, and then you're going to have an opening section, which is your introduction. Then, of course, you will have paragraphs. Just for the sake of example, I've shown 3 paragraphs here, and of course it depends on the genre as to how many paragraphs you will use. Then you'll close off your section or your piece of writing with a conclusion there. So that's basically it. Let's just look at how to organize your paragraphs. Now, usually this will depend on what you're doing. So, for example, let's say you're discussing one topic. You're just focusing on one topic. In this example, we will use the effects of smoking. So you're writing a paper identifying the effects of smoking. Obviously, in this kind of text, you're going to be talking about effect 1, effect 2, and effect 3. So this is where you apply your paragraphs. Of course, you begin with your introduction, and then after that, paragraph 1 might be about all of the health effects. Paragraph 2 might be about the environmental effects. And then paragraph 3 might be about the social effects of smoking, rather. So you have 3 different effects and 3 different paragraphs. Again, this is just an example. It really depends on what you are writing about regarding the number of paragraphs that you use. And then you will close with your conclusion. Okay, so that's discussing one topic that's the same. Let's look at essays or assignments where you have to contrast ideas. So the first one is to contrast the advantages and disadvantages of something, or maybe the pros and cons of something. So here is your choices here. Again, you start with the introduction. And then after that, you might have paragraph 1, which is the arguments for something. And then paragraph 2 would be the arguments against something. And then you close with your conclusion. Okay, so let's look at some cause and effect type responses now. So with cause and effect, obviously you have cause and effect. So you need to organize your paragraphs according to that. For example, paragraph 1 would focus on the cause number 1 and then the effect of this cause. Then you make a new paragraph and you might describe cause number 2 and discuss effect number 2 of this. But there's another way. So another approach could be to take both causes together. So paragraph 1 discusses cause number 1 and cause number 2. And then paragraph 2 discusses effect number 1 and effect number 2. Both of these are quite possible because both of them have a logical, clear progression, and each paragraph focuses around a main idea. And you have to decide which is the most appropriate for the message that you're trying to convey. Okay, that's cause and effect. Let's look at reason and result, which is another typical approach to writing. So again, you have reason and result, and this is similar. Paragraph 1 might discuss reason number 1 along with the result of this reason. And then the next paragraph will introduce reason number 2 and discuss the second result here. So that's one way. Or you could organize your paragraphs differently. So you could have paragraph 1 describes reason number 1 and reason number 2. Then you move on to a new paragraph and you discuss result number 1 and result number 2. Again, both of these approaches are correct as long as each paragraph has that focus on a main idea. You need to choose whichever approach is most comfortable and clear to you. So that's a quick look at thinking about your paragraphs within your answer. Make sure that your paragraphs have one idea and use paragraphs effectively to give structure to your piece of writing. Okay, thank you, and we'll move on and look at some other areas of organizing your written piece of work now. Okay, so this unit is all about organization. And in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about the key elements of an academic writing document that you will probably need to include. So let's go in and let's talk about the types of genre. So academic writing consists of a number of different types of document that you might write. Let's just have a look at the examples of the kind of documents that are part of academic writing. So we've got things like proposals, reports, articles or papers, thesis, case studies and essays. Now, there are a number of key elements that you need to include for these type of documents. So I'd just like to go through these key elements with you. Now, these are the key elements that are particularly important when we're talking about reports, proposals, case studies, articles and papers, or theses. The essay I'll talk about next because they are slightly different. Okay, so let me go through them in a kind of chronological order for you. Of course, we're going to start with the title. You'll need some kind of title, and try and make your title short and attention catching if you can. There's no point trying to prove you are clever and intellectual with a long and complicated topic. So just cover the topic in a simple and clear way. The next section then is the purpose of the document. So this section identifies the aims and objectives of your proposal or your report or your paper or your thesis. It states what you hope to show from the project. The next section is the justification. So this section is similar to the purpose of the document, but here you focus on why the research is important, why you are writing it, and also try and describe what kind of contribution you think the document might make to the academic world. Okay, the next one is the literature review. And of course, the literature review is the time where you get into the books, the articles, the journals, and you have to write about all the stuff that other people have written about on the particular topic that you are researching or studying or describing. So this is where you need to apply things like your paraphrasing, summarizing, using citations, and also including your own comments, opinions, and observations on the literature that you review. So this section will be quite a big element of your document, and it is usually divided up into several subheadings and things like that. Okay, the next one then is the method. So the method describes how the research will be conducted. You write about what activities will be involved in your research. And you might need to include a timeline as well to describe when exactly these activities were done. Of course, typical things might be surveys, interviews, and that kind of thing. Now, after you've described what you're going to do, the next section will be talking about the findings of your research activities. So you need to describe all of the results that you got. Of course, at this stage, it's very useful to present as much as you can in a graphic form. So please go ahead, use graphs and charts and any kind of visual infographics that you can in order to present your findings in an attractive and readable way. So once you have reported the findings, the next element of your document will be your conclusion. And of course, in the conclusion, the two important questions that you need to answer are, what do the results mean? And then, why are your results important? And you might include any other comments or ideas that you have related to the results. Now, another section that might be useful is dissemination. This is a section that tells the reader how the findings might be used or shared with other people. It is an optional one, but often this is quite useful because these reports at the end of the day need to have some kind of practical application. And of course, another key element is putting in your academic references, listing them towards the end of your document. Of course, please be very careful about the format of your references. You need to show the correct format. And for this, you'll have to check with any submission instructions that you might have. Now, the final element is the end matter, and end matter might be letters or documents that can be used to support your writing. Okay, so they are some of the key elements of most of the types of academic writing documents that you have. Let's just look at essays though, because they are slightly different. Now, with essays, I would suggest that basically there are three main types of essays. These are what I would suggest. The first one is talking about the pros and cons of something. Another type of essay is describing the cause and effect of something. And then the third type of essay is describing reasons and results. Now, regardless of the type of essay that you're writing, here is your basic essay organization structure. So you'll begin with the title. Then, of course, you need an introduction. Now, the two key elements of the introduction are, firstly, the problem statement. So this is where you unpack the title or problem that you have been set. You identify the issues and describe it in your own words. And then you need a thesis statement. So the thesis statement tells the reader what your essay is about and how the essay is structured. We now go to the main body paragraphs, and the number of paragraphs will vary depending on the kind of essay that you're being set, whether it is a detailed essay that requires an extended answer or whether it is simply a short essay. I would say that normally your main body paragraphs will be between 2 and 4 paragraphs. And then, of course, we get to the end in the conclusion, and there are 3 elements of the conclusion. So you might want to give a summary. I have suggested that giving a summary in the conclusion is optional, and you might just give a very, very brief summary of what's been described. The problem with summaries is that it's quite likely that you just repeat yourself, and you do want to avoid repetition there. So the next thing is your opinion, and it is important to give your ideas, observations on the topic of your essay. And then finally, you would close with a suggestion. What do you think can be done next? Alright, so that's a rundown of some of the key elements that you need for your academic writing document. I'd just like to close this lesson with a few comments here, because organisation is so important. And really these comments relate to getting prepared before you actually sit down and do the writing. So make sure that you think about the structure of your document. How are you going to, what are the sections? What elements are you going to include? Make a little list of those before you write anything. Be aware of what type of document you are writing, so you know what kind of sections and elements are expected in accordance with that particular type of document. And then the final point to consider is, again, specifically list those elements that you really must include. And then one final reminder is to be very clear about the purpose of the document, because this really, the why, forms the foundation of your document and why people would want to read it, why you are writing it. So before you write, make sure you are very clear about the purpose. All right then, so we've looked at some of the key elements of a document in this lesson, and then in the following lessons we're going to go into more detail in terms of organizing things, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hi everybody, this lesson is about organizing your ideas inside your paragraph. We're going to look at two things now. Firstly, I'm going to talk about topic sentences, and then I'm going to talk about organizing and arranging the information flow within a paragraph. So, let's begin and let's start talking about topic sentences. I'm sure everybody is aware that academic writing is arranged in units of information. We call each unit of information a paragraph. It is important that you remember that one paragraph represents one idea. So we can look at paragraphs as kind of like idea units. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that the main idea of your paragraph is very clear to the reader. You can do this by writing topic sentences. And a topic sentence is simply a sentence that identifies the main idea of a paragraph. You can write your topic sentence at the start of the paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, or at the end. My suggestion is to write it at the start. Let's just keep it simple here and begin your paragraphs with topic sentences. That would be the easiest way to do it. Okay, let's look at some examples now. I'll read these examples out to you, and as I read them, think about what is going to be discussed. So imagine that this is the first sentence in a paragraph. What do you think is the main idea of this paragraph, and what kind of information will the writer present? So here we go. Number one. Brown introduced the concept of rational decision making. Number two, there are several weaknesses to R.D.'s suggestions. Number three, the advantages of pre-teaching vocabulary are evident in a number of ways. Number four, the environmental effect of animal farming has been assessed in a number of publications. Number five, two distinct types of translation can be identified. Number six, this position enjoys wide-ranging support from several scholars. So I don't think I need to give you the answers, because hopefully these topic sentences are nice and clear to you and you have a clear understanding of what is going to be discussed. Okay, let's do a little bit more practice now with topic sentences, and I've got a little exercise for you. So here are 6 sentences, and I just want you to decide yes if it is a topic sentence, or no if it's not a topic sentence. And if you like, you can just write your answers down on a piece of paper as you follow me, or you could even just keep the answers in your head. So here we go. Number 1. There are a number of reasons to question Smith's hypotheses. Number 2. John proposed several solutions. Number 3. In addition to this, young women feel threatened. Number 4. There is no clear evidence for human activity in this region. Number 5. Television is also an important social phenomena because it acted as a medium to win people's attention. Number 6. Frank pointed out that the learning process is not linear. Okay, have you got those? How many of those sentences were topic sentences? What do you think? I'll show you the answer key, shall I now? So 1, yes. 2, yes. 3, no. 4, yes. 5, no. And 6, yes. In this lesson, I haven't gone into how to write a topic sentence. Really, all you need to do is be very clear of your main idea and write that out. And since there are many ideas in the world and many points that people want to make, there is no special format for a topic sentence. However, it is quite common that you will be making, if you like, a list of points or a list of comments. So things like, there are several reasons why, there are a number of factors connected to, and that kind of thing can be useful. Let's move on and let's talk about the information flow within paragraphs now. You need to think about how the information flows inside the paragraph. Basically, I'm suggesting this little diagram here where you start with your topic sentence, which is your general or main idea, and then you provide additional comments that are more specific related to that overall topic. So I've got some examples that you can look at here and you'll see what I mean. So if I read the first example out to you, the rate of inflation measures the prices of a basket of products and services. The rate of inflation increased by 0.5% in 2016. So you can see that you have the general statement, the topic sentence there, and then you have an additional comment which tells us what the increase of the rate of inflation was. Okay, so that's all fine. Now, if you look at the second example, there is a problem. I'll read it out, and as I read, can you think what the problem is? So, the rate of inflation measures the prices of a basket of products and services. Economic growth reached only 2% in 2016. So, what's the problem with the information flow here? Well, it starts off talking about rate of inflation in the first sentence, then in the second sentence there's a sudden jump to economic growth, and there's no clear connection from rate of inflation to economic growth. This is going to be confusing for the reader and it breaks the information flow. So you need to think about how you connect one sentence or one comment to the next. So we're going to consider two different ways to manage information flow inside a paragraph. And to do this, I'm going to give you some examples first, and then we will analyze these paragraphs. Let me read the first example out to you. The rate of inflation has an important effect on economic growth. It measures the prices of a basket of products and services. This rate increased by 0.5% in 2016. A higher rate of inflation consequently put pressure on domestic spending, which is a key driver of economic growth. In this case, economic growth actually fell by 0.7%. The central bank tried to stimulate the economy by reducing interest rates. As you can see here, the topic within the paragraphs actually changes. So we started off with the rate of inflation, but we also have domestic spending and economic growth. If I break this paragraph down, we have this pattern. You can see that it starts off with the rate of inflation in the first row and then introduces domestic spending. And then it goes from domestic spending to economic growth. And then in the final level here, it's on economic growth. So here there are changes. However, still you have the general idea of the paragraph, which is how the rate of inflation has affected the economy. That's one where you actually change the topic from one sentence to the next. Let's look at another way of managing information flow. So once again, I'll show you this paragraph and I'll read it out to you. Again, we're staying with the topic of economics. I hope you like economics. It's all fun. The rate of inflation measures the prices of a basket of products and services. The government selects what kinds of products and services should be included as part of this rate. Therefore, it is an important economic indicator. In general, a low rate of inflation is considered a positive indicator. The rate of inflation is measured in different ways. The rate changes depending on what products or services are included. It has a big impact on the value of money. For example, a high rate of inflation means that people can buy less for their money. So here you can see that the topic has stayed the same. It's always talking about the rate of inflation. And if we break this paragraph down, you can see that there are different stages, but all of these stages make additional comments on the rate of inflation. So there you have it. These are the two ways to manage the flow of information. One is to change topic from one sentence to the next. And then the second way is to maintain the same topic and give additional comments on that. That's the end of today's lesson. Let me just summarize what you need to do. You need to write nice and clear topic sentences that state the main idea of your paragraph. I suggest that you begin your paragraph with these sentences. And then you need to check that the flow of information inside your paragraph is clear and not confusing for the reader. All right, so I hope that's given you some ideas about how to manage your paragraphs clearly. Let's move on to the next lesson. Thank you for watching.